Hi y'all, welcome back to my channel. So it's been a little while since I filmed my last video, but I started a new job and I got really busy, so I hadn't had time to film, but I really wanted to sit down and film a video talking about how I transitioned from teaching into ed tech or going into a different industry, because I've been getting a lot of comments on my video of why I quit teaching. If you haven't seen that video, I'll go ahead and link it up here. I've been getting so many comments and just comments of people telling me that they're kind of going through the same thing and asking me questions about what I do now. So I thought I would do a quick video just kind of going over what I did, and it may help some of you who are thinking of making that transition out of education and into another field. So if you're interested in hearing all about my journey, finding a new job, then stay tuned. All right, so I didn't really prepare a list or anything of what I wanted to talk about. So it's gonna kind of be a little rambly, I think, but I don't know, I feel like I can pretty much say everything I did without doing a list or anything. But just to give a little backstory, if you're new around here, I was a teacher for 7 years. I taught bilingual elementary, but my background, or at least my degree, was in public relations and business administration. So when I decided to leave the classroom, I honestly was so scared because I'd never really worked very many places after college other than in education. I did have an internship at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital where I got to do a little bit of PR and marketing there. But other than that, I really just went straight into the classroom. So I was freaking out because I felt that I didn't know what my options were. So straight off the bat, I started applying around spring break when I was still teaching. So around March, I got really serious about applying to jobs. And it was really, really stressful at first because when you first go back into that job hunting mode, you're overwhelmed with so many different positions that you could potentially apply for, but then also it's really jarring to see all of the requirements of a position knowing that you may not fit into that category. So I downloaded good old LinkedIn and I just kind of started making just kind of exploring what options I wanted to maybe potentially pursue. And a lot of those positions were positions I was not qualified for. Like a lot of them, I think one of the places I really wanted to work for was Nordstrom, and I wanted to do some sort of, PR or something along those lines for Nordstrom. And it was really unrealistic for me to believe that I could land a job at a place like that when I really only had that education background. So, but I still applied, and I'm gonna tell you guys, if you're searching for a new job, and this isn't just out of education in general, you're gonna get denied a lot of times. And I'll get into that later on. But I mean, I would get denials so often. And at first I wasn't freaking out because I was still teaching, so I still had a job. But as the months went on and I no longer was teaching, I was a little worried. But anyways, besides the point. So the first thing that I would say is important is to download LinkedIn and really just start narrowing down what you want to do and what industry you want to go into. So like I said, I kind of wanted to go into that PR and marketing realm, but I didn't have that much experience in that field, so I wasn't really getting any interviews. What I also did was I kind of redid and revamped my resume so that it didn't look so teachery. So I really tried to use my past experiences in my internship and as well as my blog as a opportunity to kind of showcase my different skill sets. And that's another thing I'll say is that when you're transitioning out of education, I mean, this video is mostly about transitioning out of education, so I can't say the same about other careers, but when you are transitioning out of education, I would really recommend that you think about all of the things that you know how to do aside from just being a teacher, and really try to focus on that and use keywords in your resume that will help you stand out of the crowd. So for example, like I mentioned, I have a blog and I do YouTube sometimes, and so I'm pretty familiar with like WordPress and just different social media things. Even though I don't do it all the time, I still think that it's a skill set that not everyone has, and I felt that that could go on my resume. So I included my blog in my resume. I'm not gonna lie, I really think that my blog on my resume was one of the main reasons why people called me back, and that's kind of sad, but it's the truth. I don't think many people when I was applying to, marketing roles and things like that cared that I was a teacher. I mean, I think they really just looked past that. They would straight and start the interview asking about my blog. So if you have any hobbies or anything that you feel has, value, then add it to your resume and really look up keywords for your resume so that it doesn't get lost in a search engine and that your resume is able to be found whenever recruiters are searching. So, for March up until around May, I was still just applying to really unrealistic positions, but I actually landed a position at a company that was not education related. And I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, this would be amazing. The pay was really good. I went through the first round of interviews with the recruiter. They moved me to the second round of interviews. I did that. Then I moved to the third round of interviews and I got ghosted. And honestly, that is probably the worst feeling in the world. Getting ghosted by a company that has had you do 3 interviews is one, unprofessional, but 2, it's really stressful because you're constantly waiting to get that email and it never comes, and then they just, again, ghost you. So I was starting to get a little worried because I wasn't getting any hits. And so I really then decided to sit down and think about what I could do with the skills that I had as a teacher and as my blog and what I did in my internships, and what industry I could kind of transition, careers in. So I started looking and I found EdTech. So that EdTech is just short for education technology. And I found that a lot of EdTech companies are looking for former teachers to join their team because they want that insight of someone who has worked in education and can give their expertise in that field and then help them develop and create technology or PDs or whatever for teachers and students. So once I decided and I figured out that that was a space I was going to focus on applying, it really happened really fastly. So I'm gonna kind of go over that. So what I did when I decided I wanted to do EdTech was, one, I thought back to all of the technology that I used in my classroom. So things like ClassLink, I don't know, there's a bunch. I can't think at the top of my head, but I think it was like ClassLink, Nearpod, there's a lot. And I can link some EdTech companies down below so that y'all can check them out on LinkedIn. But that's what I did. I made a list and then I went to their LinkedIn page and I looked for job opportunities that I felt that I could apply for. And a lot of the jobs would say former teacher required or things like that. So I did that, and I was lucky because I had worked at a STEM school. So we used a lot of technology and I knew a lot about tech company EdTech. So that was a benefit to me, but you don't necessarily have to have known a lot about EdTech to apply to these jobs. So made a list of all the technology I used in my classroom, went to their LinkedIn page and applied for positions I felt that I was eligible for. I stopped applying to positions I just really knew I wasn't going to qualify for because I was just wasting my time. But I don't think that it's a bad thing to apply for things that you may not feel qualified for because they may still give you a shot. So the next thing that I did is I followed this guy named Jeff, which I'll link down below, his LinkedIn, and he posts literally almost every single day new jobs and new positions opening in EdTech companies for former teachers. So his whole LinkedIn is literally all about helping teachers transition out of the classroom, and so he posts jobs all the time. So I followed him and I would check every single day for new updates, and when he did post a new update, I would go in and apply if the position applied to me. And he has a pretty extensive list of opportunities. So if you wanted to do implementation, which is what I do now, and I'll kind of go into what I do now in a little bit, he would post that. He would also post graphic design, just a lot of different opportunities that anyone can apply to. So they even did a virtual job fair, which I attended, but I didn't really find anything there, and I actually got discouraged because I saw so many people searching for positions and searching for jobs, that it made me feel discouraged because I was like, am I gonna find a job? So yeah, so I would recommend that you do that. You sit down and you really think about the industry you want to go into and how you can do that. So that's what I did, and I will say that by this time it was around June, and I had already finished my year off at being a teacher. But the good thing is that as a teacher, you get paid through the summer because obviously your paychecks are divided into 12 months. And so I was off of work, so I was able to interview, but I was still getting paid because it was still my previous year's contract. But around June, I started saying, okay, like I have until maybe, I felt like I'd given myself a timeline of August because I wanted to start working again in August. I didn't want to, obviously dip into savings or things like that. So, because in August was my last teacher paycheck for the previous year. So that was my goal. Okay, so once I started applying to EdTech jobs, I actually started getting a lot of interviews. And I'm not going to lie, I think I interviewed for maybe, I would probably say, I think 9 different ed tech companies, which I'm not going to name because, yeah, I don't want to do that. But they were pretty large tech companies. And I will say that almost every single interview I did, there was a 3-interview process, three different interviews. And then one of the things I actually really disliked was that they would have you do a project, which was so time consuming. And then when I didn't get the job, I was kind of like, so I spent all that time doing a project for you, and then what happens to the project? Like, do they use it? Do they not? I don't know. I didn't like that aspect of the interviewing because I felt that if they're going to ask you to do a project, then, it's time consuming, and then they don't pick you, which is fine, but yeah, they're left with your work. And one of the projects I was like, okay, that was actually a really good project, and now they just have all my stuff. So that is something to keep in mind. A lot of places do ask for projects. At the company that I actually ended up at did not, so thank God. And it's a really easy and quick interview process. But yeah, so around that time, June, I started getting a ton of interviews, and I will say that as I started to do more and more interviews, I started obviously getting better at my interview skills. And what I will say to anyone who's trying to leave the classroom, I think one of the things that you all really need to focus on is trying to establish that the skills that you have and that you used in the classroom are skills that can translate to any job. And that's what I started doing. The first couple of interviews, I obviously didn't get the job, but I started really trying to think outside of the box on how I was going to answer interview questions. And I started thinking, okay, as a teacher, you're constantly analyzing data, right? Because we're always looking at how students are performing. And then we think of a solution of how we're going to help students either, reach a different goal, or how we're going to help students progress. So it's a constant, data-driven job. Well, a lot of other jobs in tech or anywhere are data-driven as well. So as a teacher, I think it's important to kind of see that your skills from the classroom can translate. And I remember saying in an interview, like, I feel that as a former teacher, you can kind of compare, corporate to a teacher in this way. A student was like a client in the corporate world because my students all had different needs. They all had different data. They all had different, needs and all that stuff. And I was constantly trying to figure out how I could help that client, my students. And they really liked that. And when you really think about it, it's true. Like if you're working with clients in a corporate setting, you're constantly trying to figure out ways to help your client achieve whatever goal you have with that client. And that's the same thing you're doing with students, right? And when you're working with a client, you're looking at data to drive that, whatever you're doing in order to help them. Same thing with education. So that's one way you can look at it. Another thing is you're able to work on teams, because in education, you're constantly working on teams. You're creative. You're able to write content. If you've ever worked in a classroom, you write your own lesson plans. Most of the time, you probably helped write curriculum, so you're a good writer. I mean, there's a variety of different skills that you can really, capitalize on and show that it wasn't just a skill that was a classroom skill, but it's a skill that you can take anywhere. Another one is that you probably can handle stress well and are constantly, as a teacher, you're constantly changing and having to readapt and learn. And that's a skill that is really powerful in a corporate setting as well. So I think that when you're thinking about interview questions, think about your skills as a teacher and try to, tailor those skills and how they would apply to a corporate setting. So it's another thing that I did. And like I said, at first I wasn't doing that. But after a while, I started realizing that teachers are literal rock stars and do so much, and they should be able to showcase those skills anywhere else they decide to go. So that's one of the things. Another thing that I did was really just practice my interviewing skills. I hadn't interviewed in about 7 years because that's how long I taught. So I was a little rusty the first couple of go arounds. So I think that obviously practicing interviewing skills, not being nervous and really being authentic, I think goes a long way, because when you're trying too hard maybe, or you're so nervous that you're just kind of babbling, I think that it's very apparent, people can see right through that. And I noticed that, with my current job, I was authentically myself. I truly believed in what this company was doing. And so I felt that that's kind of what translated in my interview. The other thing is, don't apply for jobs that you don't really care to do, and I think that's important, because at first I was like, I just need a job, really. But then I was like, no, I'm leaving this role and I want to work somewhere that I like and that I care about the work. And so I really narrowed down the places that I felt that I could thrive, first of all, grow, and learn something that would also benefit me as I progress in my career. So I think that's another thing to think about whenever you're applying for a new position. Another thing that I did was I really tried to think about salary. And I know that's a uncomfortable discussion to have with an interviewer or whatever, but moving forward, obviously in my career, I knew that I wanted to grow. And so I thought about the different salary requirements that I had, and I only applied for jobs that fit that requirement. Now, I will say that when you're making a transition from one career to another, you may have to take a pay cut, right? And that's just the reality of it. You may have to, but think about what type of position you land and how that can help you as you progress in your career. And so that's what I did. And I feel that I ended up in the right place, because first of all, I love my job. I ended up in an implementation specialist role. So I basically help districts and administrators with implementation of the PD that my company sells. And so another thing that was really important to me was trying to find a job that I felt that I could have a work-life balance at. And so I noticed that a lot of jobs that I was applying for were, mostly all of them were remote, because the nice thing about tech companies is that they're all over the place. And a lot of them are remote. So if you are looking for a position that's remote, I definitely think you should look in ed tech. And I'll say this about working remotely. At first, I didn't really want to work remote. And I know that is an unpopular opinion for most, but I felt like I'm a really social person. I really enjoy interacting with my coworkers. And that was something I was really going to miss from education and leaving the classroom. But working from home has shown me just a whole different side of things, in the fact that your work-life balance is so much better. And I don't know if that's just because my job just gives me like the best work-life balance, or working from home, I never have the Sunday blues. And if you're a teacher and you know what the Sunday blues are, man, I used to get those so bad. I was like, not another week, like another week of stress, another week of anxiety. And I do not feel that at all in my current role. And I do think that has to do with the company's work-life balance and just like how they function. And I think that that's an important question to ask when you're interviewing, like, what is a work-life balance like here? So yeah. And I do not feel like I am not social, because I'm always talking to my coworkers and we're always collaborating. So I don't feel that way. So yeah, that was another thing that was important to me. And if you are looking for a job outside of the classroom, maybe something that's really appealing to you, that a lot of ed tech companies are remote. Overall, I ended up landing a job as an implementation specialist where I basically help different districts and administrators. I help them with implementation of our PD services at my company. But I've had the opportunity to work in design as well, and a little bit of social media, and I just feel like I really was able to land this job because of how I kind of organized what I was going to do next. And like I said, I started applying for unrealistic positions that maybe later on, who knows? I mean, I don't know where my life is going to go. But at that moment, transitioning out of the classroom, that was not realistic to apply to like D magazine or something, you know, like just not gonna happen probably. So I wasted a little bit of time. So if you're a teacher, I would say start as soon as like spring break if you plan on, you know, not going back for the next year, because applying to new jobs takes a long time. You're gonna get heartbroken because you're probably gonna go through a lot of denials, but I would say don't lose confidence, because to be honest, I interviewed all summer long, and I mean, it was back-to-back interviews, and I was like, what am I doing wrong? Like, I'm getting all these interviews, I'm going to like 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds of interviews, and then they just drop me. And it was just so discouraging, and I started to get like kind of not depressed, but you know, it was like, what the heck? And then finally, literally in the month of August, right before I went to one of my really good friends' weddings, I landed my job, and I was like, oh my God, I met my goal. I actually landed a job in August like I said I wanted to. So I would say start as soon as you can. Obviously don't start like in December if you plan on still teaching all of spring, because if you get a job offer, you probably can't, you know, break your contract. Another thing, I know that I've seen a lot of teachers like on TikTok saying like, I'm gonna quit midway through the year. And I would say that's not a good idea. And let me tell you why. There were many times I was like, I'm done. I'm not coming back here tomorrow. But I'm glad I did not do that. First of all, because I would have felt like crap if I left my kids. Second of all, you don't want to burn any bridges, because at the end of the day, a lot of the companies that I applied for, they asked for recommendations, and I was happy that I was able to still have a good relationship with my admin or you know, people that I worked with, so that they did give me a good recommendation. So I would say try your hardest, stick it out, and don't burn any bridges as you transition out of the classroom. So that's just a little tip. And then yeah, just like don't feel upset when you get denied. Obviously, it's hard to hear someone say no to you, but just know that a lot of the skills that you and I learned from working in education are valuable. They are something that I feel like shaped me into the person that I am in the workforce now. And I feel that if you really look into some of the most I would say your biggest skill sets and in the classroom, like let's say you were very creative. Well, how can you apply creativity to the job that you are applying for? If you were really good at holding small groups with your students and helping drive instruction based on data, okay, well, how can you take that and look at the current role you're applying for and try to use the skills that you did in the classroom and apply them to a corporate setting. And yeah, I think that when you really think of it that way, I think that you'll start realizing how many skills you have and how transferable they are. So I think that's a quick little rant on kind of all the things that I really did. I mean, I don't think it was very much, but I think I started just to really focus on what I wanted, and then that's kind of how I landed my role now. And so, yeah, overall, I think that it's important to download LinkedIn, be active on LinkedIn, update your LinkedIn so that it doesn't maybe sound so teachery, and think of how your skills in the classroom can translate to corporate. Think about keywords that you can look up and make your resume resemble those keywords so that your resume does not kind of go into oblivion when you apply for a job. Another thing is I had to redo my resume like 5 different times because I wasn't getting any hits with the first resume. Then I redid it, and then I did get hits, but like, you know, interviews, but they weren't interviews that I really wanted. I was just getting interviews from like jobs that were sales, and I am not a salesperson. Like I just could never work in sales. It's not for me. So then I finally redid it. It took me forever. It was so tiring. But I did it. And that's when I really saw a difference in the interviews that I was getting, is when I redid my whole LinkedIn and my resume. I didn't pay anyone to help me. I just kind of looked at different, I don't know, examples, keywords, like I said, and things like that. So yeah, I think that really is everything. I think one of the best tips I can give you if you're trying to transition from education to another industry, it would be to really look into ed tech, because honestly, they're looking for teachers. They want our teachers' kind of perspective of things, and a lot of them require that you have had education, like a teacher background or educational background. So I will leave all the links for the LinkedIn pages that I would really kind of follow and all of that. And I wish all of you the best, every single one of you who is commenting on my videos, and there's a lot, and I'm still getting comments on that video who are saying they felt the same way that I did whenever I made that video. And at that time I didn't have a job. So I will tell you this, and then I will stop ranting. You're gonna find a job. You're gonna be fine. You just have to take the time to actually do it. And it can be gruesome because you're busy, and but I would literally sit on the computer sometimes for hours applying until I finally landed something. And now I'm so much happier. I love my job. I genuinely love my job. Like, I'm not just saying that because I'm in front of a camera. Like, I genuinely love my job, and I'm happy, and my life has become so much less stressful because on Sundays I can actually do stuff because I don't have to be worried about lesson plans or grading and things like that. So I would definitely recommend, if you're not happy in whatever job you have, for you to do your research and put yourself out there, and don't let a job make you miserable. And also, you can make a lot more money outside of teaching. So that is it, I think, for today. If you have any questions, please comment down below. I'd be more than happy to help with any questions you may have. I probably didn't give y'all a good understanding of everything I did, but I tried my best. But if you have any questions, comment down below and I will make sure to answer them. Make sure to subscribe to my channel. I'm gonna try to make more videos more often now that I'm kind of already set in a schedule with my new job and everything. And so yeah, don't forget to subscribe down below, like this video if it was helpful. And if you haven't seen my Why I Quit Teaching video, I will link that down below as well, so you can watch that. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.